Let's get started. I am so excited today to have Kirill here. He is a cybersecurity and threat intelligence analyst that specializes in malware analysis, reverse engineering, and adversary tradecraft with a focus on software supply chain threats. He currently serves as a senior threat intelligence analyst at Socket and previously spent some time at Recorded Future, where he worked across advanced malware and cybercrime teams. He is a graduate of SANS Technology Institute, has many GX certs, and contributes to the security community through research, writing, and speaking. His career began in global investigative work, combating human trafficking and corruption, which is an experience that continues to help shape his evidence-driven approach to cybersecurity today. And so I'm going to pass it on over.
Ashley, thank you so very much. Hi, everyone. I'm Kirill Boychenko. I'm a senior threat intelligence analyst on Socket's threat research team, and I am a SANS Technology Institute alum. Thank you very much, our SANS Technology Institute community, for pulling this together and for inviting me. Today, I want to do two things. First, I want to share a little bit of my journey from SANS Technology Institute into the cyber threat intelligence field. And second, I want to give something practical back by talking about the work I do today, and specifically finding malware in open source, how threat landscape is changing, and what that means for us as defenders. I know that I'm in good company here with fellow SANS Technology Institute community members because I still remember how it felt when I first applied. I knew I never would feel satisfied in cybersecurity if I didn't understand the fundamentals. I wanted to understand computing, IT, intrusion analysis, incident handling, and how defenders actually think and work. I didn't want to be like the guy in the image trying to skip the fundamentals, because they really are a prerequisite for becoming a well-rounded cybersecurity professional. That's one reason SANS Technology Institute meant so much to me. It was one of the hardest educational experiences I've had, but also one of the most valuable and rewarding. I completed the Applied Cybersecurity program at SANS Technology Institute from 2020 to 2022, and these are the GX certifications I earned along the way. A lot of you know these already. You may have taken some of these courses, be in them now, or deciding what to take next. One thing that was especially helpful for me was how I approached the elective. When I got to that point in the program, I looked carefully at the available options. I wrote a short summary of each and brought that list to my boss at the time. I asked which course would be most useful for the team and for the work we were doing. And she pointed me toward intrusion analysis, basically saying, we care about snort rules, and that ended up a great choice. I love the course, but just as importantly, I was able to apply it right away at work. Writing my first snort rules and using that knowledge to help the team was a big win. That's one practical thing I wanted to share as an alum. If you can, try to connect your course choices to where you want to be useful next. I want to take a moment to say thank you to some of the people who had a great impact on my time at SANS Technology Institute. Special thanks to my advisor, Delisha Hodo, for her support, guidance, and encouragement throughout the program. And I am very grateful to Joshua Wright, David Holzer, Brian Simon, and James Lynn for the chance to learn from them. They are exceptional instructors. I think a lot of people in cybersecurity and threat intelligence can relate to this slide, because the path into this field is rarely a straight line. It definitely was not for me. I started working in cybersecurity and threat intelligence in 2018. But before, I worked on investigations and programs at places like the United Nations, the American Bar Association, and the International Labor Rights Forum. And my work was focused on mitigating human rights, specifically on mitigating human trafficking, corruption, and labor abuses, and dedicated to protection of human rights. So in many ways, this was a very different path from what I do today. SANS Technology Institute was an important part of that transition for me, and I know it is for many of you as well. Ashley very generously described this talk as "hear from an alum and subject matter expert," and my imposter syndrome showed up right on schedule. I think a lot of us in this field can relate to that because this space moves fast, keeps changing, and constantly reminds you how much there's still to learn. For the second part of the talk, I want to shift into the field where I work today. You'll see why open source matters as a security domain. And then I'll talk about how the threat landscape is changing and walk through two bigger themes that keep me up at night. And those are developer compromise and automation and workflow compromise. The cases I chose for today's talk are not hypothetical. These are some of the largest supply chain attacks we've seen in years, and my team and I were directly involved in responding to, investigating, and analyzing them. If anything is unclear along the way, or if you have any questions or points you would like to discuss, please write them down. We'll have dedicated time for discussion at the end. I'll be very happy to hear your questions and comments. Just to give a little context on me, my background is in cybersecurity, threat intelligence, and malware analysis. And in 2024, I joined Socket on the threat research side. What drew me in right away was the same feeling I had when I first got into cybersecurity. Things move fast. There's always something new to learn. And open source is this huge, complex, fascinating world of ecosystems, workflows, and trust relationships. A big part of what I do today is threat hunt across that landscape. And when I hunt within these ecosystems, I'm really looking across a huge part of the modern software supply chain, where one malicious package or extension can affect a lot of people very quickly. You see many different logos on this slide. These represent different open source ecosystems that Socket, my company, protects, which means these are some of the ecosystems where I threat hunt. Some of these may be familiar to you and some may not, but that's really the point. Open source is not one thing. It is a very large software supply chain made of many different ecosystems, registries, package managers, and extension marketplaces that modern technology depends on every day. Maybe you only recognize Chrome on this slide. Chrome is built on Chromium, which is open source. Many of us use Chrome every day, and I get to threat hunt in Chrome extensions, just as I do in OpenVSX extensions and packages published across other ecosystems shown here. The same idea applies more broadly. We're talking on Zoom right now, and like most modern technology companies, Zoom relies on open source software somewhere in its stack. The same is true for the devices we use, whether desktop, laptop, or mobile. You can walk around your office or your home, point to all kinds of software and hardware, and there is a good chance open source components are somewhere inside. That's what makes open source so important. It is everywhere, it is powerful, it is useful, and it's deeply embedded in the technology we rely on. But that also makes it complex and very meaningful attack surface. Then I started seeing malware in the ecosystems that I monitor. And after a while, I started to feel like I was seeing it everywhere. Not literally everywhere, of course, but enough that the question stopped being, here's another malicious package, and became, why is this so common in open source and software supply chain? And what should that mean for us as defenders? After a while, I felt like I was starting to get my arms around the problem a little bit. Not because I had solved it, but because the chaos started to group itself into recurring patterns. Here on this slide, it's not a perfect classification, but it's a useful one for me. Let me take NPM as an example to talk about these categories. NPM is a massive JavaScript and TypeScript ecosystem that developers trust every day. Threat actors abuse that trust by publishing malicious packages on the NPM registry, often using typo squatting, obfuscation, multi-stage malware. They also use automation, AI, and legitimate services to scale and hide their malicious campaigns. Although each case looks different, the underlying patterns repeat. And of course, some threat actors don't stick to just one adversarial technique from the categories we just saw. Some use as many of them as they can, and North Korean threat actors are a very good example of that. I've spent a lot of time researching the contagious interview operation, and what stands out is how willing they are to mix, adapt, and layer adversarial techniques. Earlier this year, I presented at the SANS Cyber Threat Intelligence Summit and spoke specifically about hunting North Korea's state-sponsored contagious interview operation. The recording is up on YouTube. If you're curious, please check it out. One thing I keep seeing with North Korea's contagious interview activity is that they do not stay confined to a single ecosystem. In Research Socket published recently, I covered a contagious interview campaign spanning 5 ecosystems: NPM, PyPI, Go modules, crates.io, and Packagist. These threat actors are very comfortable reusing the same broad playbook across different ecosystems. I want to turn this back to you for a moment. When was the last time you used one of these ecosystems? Maybe you ran a Python-based tool. Maybe you used a JavaScript package, a Go utility, a PHP application, something built in Rust. Whether you realized it or not, there is a good chance you were relying on packages and dependencies from one of these ecosystems. So the question I want to ask yourself is, do you know what you're actually running? Do you know all of the direct and transitive dependencies behind the tools you use? Most of us do not. And that's part of what it makes such an important security problem. This slide may look a little complex at first, but the core idea is very simple. What I'm showing you here are 3 attack models, and these models coexist. The key difference between them is trust. As you move from package abuse to maintainer compromise to weaponized automation, the threat actor inherits more trust, and that makes the problem more dangerous and harder to defend against. The older attack model of package abuse, it's on the left, is still very real. Malicious outsiders uploading malware through low trust accounts. But what worries me more is the broader reality shift of trusted maintainers getting compromised, and beyond that, new reality where trusted automation gets weaponized. At that point, it stops being just a package problem and becomes a workflow and pipeline problem, where legitimate tools can start acting on the threat actor's behalf. Here's a pretty good representation of my brain lately. For a while, I felt like I had a decent handle on the patterns, but the developer compromise started looming larger and larger. And that's when the problem began to feel different to me, because now the trust is real first and only later gets turned against you. And then, just when I think I'm already worried enough, my brain goes one step further and lands on developer automation compromise. And from a defender perspective, that means the challenge is no longer just spotting malware, but understanding where trust exists, where it gets delegated, and how it can quietly be turned against us. Axios compromise was one of the clearest examples of how serious software supply chain attacks have become in 2026. Axios is one of the most widely used JavaScript HTTP client libraries. So the moment it was compromised, the potential blast radius was immediately significant. My team and I were among first responding security companies, looking at it early on, and even before the full picture was clear, we already knew enough to be very concerned. On this slide, I want to walk you through exactly what we're looking at. At the top is the legitimate Axios package on the NPM registry. You can see several tabs, including the dependencies tab, which shows that the legitimate package has 3 dependencies. In other words, Axios relied on 3 packages. You can see that Axios had more than 174,000 dependents. That's how many other packages relied on it. And in the right corner, you can see just how popular it is. More than 100 million weekly downloads. So even before we get to the malicious part, this already tells you the scale. Axios is one of the most widely used packages on NPM. Now look at the image in the middle. This shows how the malicious version of Axios appeared on the NPM registry at the time it was discovered. At first glance, it looked normal, but there was one important difference. Instead of 3 dependencies, it had 4, and that 4th dependency is the key detail. The added package, plain crypto.js, was not part of the legitimate Axios package. That extra dependency is where the malicious code came from. So the compromise didn't rely on someone rewriting Axios to include malware in its code directly in the main package code. Instead, 2 malicious Axios releases pulled in a new 4th dependency, and that's what introduced the malware. Let me walk you through what is shown on this slide, because this is a good example of how the social engineering worked. On the left, you can see a Slack guest invitation email sent to Firas Abukadiji, who is my CEO and the creator of many widely used NPM packages. This was an impersonation attempt. The threat actors were posing as a real person at a real company and using a legitimate-looking business pretext to start a conversation to build trust. On the right, you can see a post from Scott Moat, the author of .env, saying that he was targeted as well. And if you look closely, he is replying to Firas, as I mentioned, my CEO, Jordan Harband, who is my colleague, and JDD, John David Dalton, also my colleague and a friend. So that felt personal. These are all very prominent maintainers in the NPM ecosystem. Jordan maintains hundreds of widely used packages, and John David Dalton is the creator of Lodash, one of the most widely used packages in the ecosystem. This was not a simple phishing email. The threat actors were deliberately going after high-profile, high-trust maintainers across NPM. Their goal was to compromise the people whose packages sit deep in the software supply chain and are trusted by millions of developers and applications. Unfortunately, the threat actors succeeded in compromising the maintainer of Axios, Jason Simon. But what the slide shows is that the campaign was broader than a single victim. Multiple prolific maintainers were targeted at the same time. What we learned later from Axios's maintainer Jason Simon's postmortem is that the threat actors got him onto a Teams call, and during that call, presented what looked like a legitimate update prompt. And this slide shows what it can look like. But clicking the update did not install a real fix. It installed rat malware. And that changed the whole shape of the incident. Because what initially might have looked like stolen token or some narrower credential compromise turned out to be much worse. The threat actors had access to Jason Simon's entire machine. The key point from this slide is not Zoom versus Teams versus Slack. The key point is that the branding can change. These threat actors are known to swap in different platforms, fake updates, fake workspaces, and fake personas. What makes these attacks work is that they feel routine. They look like ordinary collaboration, not obvious phishing. There's no sense of urgency. The threat actors are patient and deliberate. In the Axios case, there was significant setup before the compromise. Fake personas, a staged Slack workspace, and a carefully built sense of legitimacy. This was not a one-click phish. It was a trust-building operation. One of the easiest defensive measures I can recommend is dependency cooldown. The idea is simple. Do not let your builds immediately consume brand new releases. Give the ecosystem a little time to inspect them first. My recommendation is at least 48 hours, and for more sensitive environments, a week is completely reasonable. I like this control because it matches how these incidents actually unfold. In the Axios case, the malicious versions were live only about a few hours before they were identified and removed. So even a modest age gate would have reduced exposure a lot. Your pipeline does not need to be first in line for a release that was published 5 minutes ago. We all wear multiple hats. We defend systems, but we also rely on open source every day. So incidents like these are not abstract. They can hit the same organizations we work in and protect. With these questions on the slide, I'd like us to think about three things: visibility, trust, and readiness. How quickly would we actually know something like this was happening? Where are we still giving too much trust away by default? If one of our major dependencies got hit, what would our first hour actually look like? These are some of the perspectives and reflections I want to pass on to you, especially as current and future responders and incident handlers. Team PCP was an easy choice for this part of the talk, and not just because the attacks were significant, but because they really made the pattern impossible to ignore. This was a cross-ecosystem supply chain campaign that moved through GitHub Actions, Docker Hub, OpenVSX, NPM, and PyPI, and it ties directly back to the two themes we just talked about: developer compromise and trusted automation compromise. Team PCP threat actors were going after the systems and workflows that move trusted code around. For this part, I spent a good amount of time going through the official postmortems and security write-ups on the treaty, checkmarks, light LLM, and Telnix incidents. Not because I want to read those reports back to you, but because I wanted to understand how the attacks happened, why they worked, how the companies responded, and what they changed afterward. And of course, no public postmortem includes everything. But these incidents were unusual in that a lot of attack surface was already visible in public, including malicious packages, compromised workflows, and other open source artifacts that researchers could inspect for themselves. So instead of walking through every victim one by one, I tried to distill what kept recurring. What stood out is that the threat actors kept abusing trusted ways software gets delivered, and then using stolen credentials, mutable references, and unpinned installs to help the attacks spread. So I just said a number of terms, and those were mutable tags, floating refs, and unpinned installs. On a fundamental level, they mean that people were not locking their dependencies or code references to one exact good known version. They were trusting a name that could later point to something different. And often the attacks were quiet enough that the targeted environments still look healthy while the malicious logic was already running. The same weaknesses kept showing up again and again. Too much trust in automated systems, incomplete early containment, secrets that were too easy to reach, and software references that were trusted too easily. And because many of these attacks look normal at first, threat actors often gained valuable time before anyone realized what was happening. So if I had to reduce all of these postmortems and incident reports to the lessons I would want to carry forward, it would be these. Pin more, slow down new releases, separate release paths, keep fewer secrets exposed, respond broadly, and hunt beyond source code. After looking across Team PCP's supply chain attacks, what stayed with me was what these incidents say about our own environments. To me, the questions on this slide really come down to three things. Exposure. Where are secrets, trust, and automation more exposed than we think? Visibility. If trusted tooling or a trusted dependency started doing something malicious, what would tell us first? What would alert us? Readiness. If this happened in our environment today, how ready we would be in the first hour. So these come to the following perspectives and reflections I want to pass on to you here as well. Are we still overexposed? Are we still under-observing? And are we ready if this landed in our own environment tomorrow morning? Here's the final part of my presentation. It's no longer just automated attacks. It's attacks against automation and attacks through automation. We automate things to move faster and be more efficient. Threat actors look at that and think, great, we'll automate too. And if possible, we'll compromise the automation you already trust. The next two cases are connected by the same bigger idea. Here again, I'm drawing from investigations our team helped surface, analyze, and report. The top on this slide is about incident tied to Team PCP that we already covered, and specifically unauthorized AI agent execution code that abused local AI coding agents for recon and exfiltration. The bottom incident is called sandworm mode, which is a separate NPM worm case that also ended up poisoning AI toolchains for further compromise. In both cases, the threat actors were not satisfied with just dropping malware somewhere. They were trying to poison automation itself and get the agent or a workflow to start doing malicious things for them. So this section is really about what happens when trusted automation becomes part of the attack surface. Earlier in the talk, I used this progression to show how different models and software supply chain attacks, how they progress. Here's a more specific zoom in on the automation and workflow compromise. On the left is the familiar attack model. A malicious package does the bad thing itself. It steals data, talks to a threat actor infrastructure, drops another stage, or executes malware directly. In the middle is the shift that matters here. The payload is no longer trying to do everything on its own. Instead, it is built to launch trusted local AI tooling and use that tooling in ways that benefit the threat actor. And on the right are examples of the kinds of local tools the payload tries to conscript into that process. Claude, Codex, Gemini, and similar agent-style tooling that you can see on the slide in the third bucket. The malicious code is no longer just trying to run. It's trying to delegate. This is where the attack model really changes. What you're looking at here is injected code from the malicious Aquatrivi VS Code extension. This code silently tries to launch 5 local AI tools. It uses highly permissive flags. Take a look at the flags in the code showed on this slide. You can see Claude and the flag dangerously skip permissions. You can look at Codex and it says, ask for approval never. Sandbox, danger full access. Gemini prompt has a flag YOLO, and so does Copilot. The code ran before the normal setup, so the extension could still appear to work normally while the malicious logic ran in the background. These highly permissive flags are doing a lot of storytelling for us. Ask for approval never and YOLO. None of them are subtle. The payload is very clearly trying to remove friction, remove oversight, get the local tool to act with as little human involvement as possible. These flags are also practical detection clues. They tell us what kinds of child processes, execution, command line arguments, and local tool abuse we should be looking for. Here are 3 prompt examples that illustrate a broader pattern. In the first malicious treaty version, the prompt frames the local AI tool as a kind of forensic investigator and pushes it toward recon and exfiltration through any available channel. In the second malicious treaty version, it becomes more operational to identify tools, authorization sessions, write a report, and use the victim's own authenticated GitHub CLI for exfiltration. Then in the third prompt for sandworm mode, this prompt is injecting into a fake MCP tool description. So the assistant here is prompted to quietly collect SSH keys, cloud credentials, and sensitive files with secrets without telling the user. I wanted to end this session the same way I ended the earlier one, by turning it back to us a little. If the threat actor is trying to steer trusted local automation, then the real questions for us are about presence, visibility, access, and readiness. What's already in our environments? what would actually alert us, what those tools can reach, and how prepared we would be if one of them got poisoned. I want to end by zooming in a little, not on one package or one threat actor or one workflow, but on what the problem actually looks like now. To me, the biggest shift is that identities, tokens, keys, and automation permissions are now part of the software supply chain itself. Least privilege matters more than we sometimes want to admit. Trust boundaries need to be treated more deliberately, and integrity matters at every step. The more we rely on mutable tags and implicitly trusted resolution, the more we give threat actors easy ways to scale. These quotes that you can see on the slide are drawn directly from postmortems and incident reports. These are things victim organizations learn the painful way. And what struck me is how often the same lessons repeat across very different incidents. I want to leave our group with them in the spirit of understanding the problem more clearly. The better we understand where trust is abused, where visibility breaks down, and how attacks move through the gaps between controls, the better we can defend against them. To me, this is one of the reasons this field is so interesting. Software supply chain security now sits at the intersection of many disciplines: malware analysis, threat intelligence, identity abuse, cloud security, developer tooling, and detection engineering. And I think that's also why strong fundamentals still matter so much. The next generation of defenders will need to understand not just malware, but also trust, workflows, and automation. So I'll leave it there, and I'd be very happy to take questions or hear your thoughts. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much for that. That was wonderful. And we do have a couple questions, so I will start going through them. But if you guys have more questions, please add them into the Q&A. So we have one person, they are in the master's program right now, and they have been focusing on the cloud security focus area with a targeted goal of entering threat intelligence. Would you consider the FOR 610 GREM, the reverse engineering malware course, a requirement to entering your field?
That's an excellent question and a great program. I think that you're lucky, person who asked this question, because I don't recall cloud security being its own discipline when I took my first course at SANS. And now there are dedicated courses to this domain, and it's excellent. I think that these courses will help greatly. The company where I work, we're hiring. We have open roles. I take part in reviewing some of the submissions and some of the applications and resumes. I would take note of a completed course like that. Of course, I may be biased, right? I'm a SANS Technology Institute alum, but I do believe that our education is exceptionally hard, but also exceptionally good. I think these are great courses. And once again, you're lucky that you have access to them, because I don't remember having access to these courses when I started the program.
And then building off of that question, another student wants to know what knowledge, skills, or SANS courses do you recommend to build a useful base to detect, respond, and investigate such compromises? If you were to start over, would you delve deep into understanding secure coding practices, understanding cloud environments, CI/CD pipelines, or something else?
This is another great question. Um, I know what helped me, and that may not be a perfect trajectory, but well, mine was that I started in threat intelligence, and then dive dove deep into cybersecurity, and then I wanted to be as technical as I could. So I started working on malware analysis and reverse engineering, and coming with that perspective to defending software supply chain and open source is is really helpful because uh, ultimately malware is trying to do a set of similar things. It's trying to get onto the system, collect sensitive data, exfiltrate that data. When we understand those core uh, activities of malware, and we have enough experience analyzing malware, we we will have a good hand at analyzing packages, extensions, code in those packages. That certainly helped me in my journey, but understanding CI/CD pipelines, understanding cloud security, understanding workflows, being great at things that developers love to use, such as GitHub Actions, or how package registries host code and how it's being delivered. Understanding all those things would help immensely. But I believe that going back to that slide about CTI path not being a straight line, well, that was my case, and I know for many of SANS Technology Institute students and alums, that's the case too. So sometimes we were charting something for ourselves, and it may be forensic path, and then we end up in cloud security. That happens. I think that the fundamentals that we get from SANS are uh, are incredibly strong, and it also shows in the program, right? It's not just a course. We actually uh, we stayed with the program. That shows some persistence too, right? So that's a good thing that you're part of the program. Um, Courses are excellent on its own, but I think when we complete a full-rounded program, that does show quite a bit to hiring teams, but also at the end of the day, it feels so good to complete a program, especially one so hard that SANS offers.
Yeah, you guys definitely have your work cut out for you, but you all got it. Good job so far, everyone that's on the call. Another question came in. So, for those who are on the blue team and lack a dedicated coding background, how would you advise for those interested with threat hunting and preventive controls for similar supply chain compromises? They realize that this varies massively, but at a high level, how could we deploy detections using Snort? I'm not sure how to pronounce that one. Seek, et cetera, to help identify malicious compromise due to trusted supply chain channels.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I know how it feels. Uh, I was always closest to blue team as discipline versus red teaming and purple teaming. Blue team is exactly what I was um, responsible for in my various jobs in cybersecurity. And when I started, my coding skills were limited, but I was charged and I was responsible for helping build detection rules. So I started with Yara rules, and then progressed to Sigma rules, and then Snort rules. I'm also familiar with Zik. I think it's excellent. The way that it is taught at SANS, I think is also top notch. So even with limited exposure to programming languages and coding, being pushed into detection engineering, we actually learned quite a bit of code. Thinking about the Yara rules, building that logic. Um, Same goes for um, Sigma and Snort. Yara especially though, right? Because it is ultimately um, C-like programming language. So when we build enough tools, build write enough Yara rules, we certain things we just start catching onto them. And then when I started learning more and more of Python, there were certain things I was thinking back and to my detection engineering work and thinking, oh, that was so useful. I wish I knew this before. But yeah, I would certainly not be discouraged about uh, the journey of learning code, being on the blue team, learning detections. You mentioned Zeek, you mentioned snort rules. That that is, I think, even though a parallel path, but it's not mutually exclusive, and I believe it's incredibly helpful for your coding journey as well.
And then another question, what were your favorite or most impactful courses for your career that you took through SANS?
Yes. So intrusion analysis and um, hacker tools techniques from Joshua Wright. Um, it's such a fun course, and it almost made me cry when I had to take the exam. I remember. I know for some students those come pretty easy. It wasn't my case. I had to study maybe the hardest in my life, um, but so was a big joy for me to get the cert and complete the exam and get a good score too. I felt good about that. Um, but yeah, those were some of my favorite courses. All courses I really liked in my program, but those two I would say, yeah, hands down my favorite ones.
And then this isn't a question, but your advisor, Delisha, is on the call, and she just wanted to say that she's so proud of you and appreciates the shout out and the thanks. And that was a pleasure advising and supporting you, and happy to see that you're now doing things like this webinar.
Thank you so much, Delisha. I'm so grateful that you were able to attend. I'm so grateful for your time, for your patience with me throughout the whole program. Um, you really made it happen and work for me, and I'm just incredibly grateful. Thank you.
And there are no other questions right now. I'll give you guys a couple more seconds to type one in if you do have them. But in the meantime, I did put a link of your recording of your CTI session in the chat, so you guys can go and watch that. And then again, we are recording this, and so if you want to go back, you'll be able to watch us on the school's YouTube channel. And one more question came in. So you mentioned using OSINT in your daily tasks. Have you taken any courses on that? And then if so, what do you recommend?
Okay, so question is about OSINT techniques. Yes, so I've used OSINT in my I think all of my jobs, and it's somewhat challenging to offer or recommend a course because this field is moving so fast and tools and platforms they change so much that I feel like it's a constant learning process. Well, so is cybersecurity, of course, but I feel like OSINT is even more so because all those platforms that we use for hunting and researching, they change so fast. I know that SANS has a great course on OSINT. Uh, Actually, one of my very good friends is an instructor of one of SANS OSINT courses. Um, and I think that's a good place to start. I also know that Michael Basil has a number of good books, good courses to consider. And then, of course, learning by doing. Of when you do your research, note what actually works, things that break, um, new workflows. Uh, Nothing helps more than practice and OSINT.
Wonderful. Well, those are all of our questions. Do you have any closing thoughts you would like to share with everyone?
I'm just so grateful to be here. It's incredible. Like I mentioned, Ashley, when you reached out and this opportunity came that I can speak to Science Technology Institute students. I remember my time being a student, and of course, imposter syndrome flared up immediately. But I was also very happy to put this material together, and I see it as hopefully me giving back to our community, which helped me so much. So my parting thought is gratitude and of course good luck. I know programs are not easy, but oh, it feels so good when you're done, and I wish you all the best.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to do this for the students today. And everyone, like I said, we will be sharing this recording on the college's YouTube channel, so we can go catch it there. And there's a couple other comments that just wanted to thank you so much for doing this today. And so we appreciate you. And I hope everyone has a wonderful week. We've made it through Monday, so let's get to the rest of the week. Thank you all.